you ever wondered what it's like to sit in on a magazine editorial meeting? Well, this is your chance. You're listening to Salt Lake Speaks, a monthly podcast where our editors, writers, and staff dig deeper into stories, chat with newsmakers, and talk amongst ourselves about arts, culture, food, music, politics, or whatever else might strike our fancy. After all, we are Utah's biggest fans.
I'm Mary Brown Maloof.
I'm Glenn Worchel.
I am Christy Marcy.
And we're Salt Lake Speaks.
Hello again. Welcome to Salt Lake Speaks. This is Glenn Worchel, managing editor at Salt Lake Magazine. It would be an understatement to say the city's been rocked by a surprise selection of 4 new homeless shelters. Many of the neighborhoods that have been chosen to receive a shelter have reacted with rage. And Jackie Biskupski's regime is kind of in chaos right now, reeling from that anger and from city council members who have been breaking ranks with her. But one neighborhood, the Ballpark District, seems to be taking the placement of a men's shelter, which is one of the worst kinds of shelters in the eyes of many residents of the city, but they're taking it kind of in stride. Opposite me is Kevin Klunch of the Ballpark neighborhood. He's a resident and he's a board member of the community council in the Ballpark neighborhood, which is around Smith's Ballpark. How did you get involved in this particular issue? Or what has it pulled you into it as much as it has?
Well, our neighborhood has taken a great many hits repeatedly. The city council has brought in and approved sites that are detrimental to moving forward for our neighborhood, right? They've seemed to kind of zone in poverty into our area. Ours is the area that gets all the low-income housing. It gets the shelters. We have several shelters in our area already. And so, it's just one more. The idea, we respond with resignation, but we still want a place at the table. We weren't really given a place at this table, per se. The area was selected without any input whatsoever from us. Did you find that particularly annoying, the lack of input and transparency before the decision came down? We tried to have input. Our chairman of the Ballpark Community Council attempted to volunteer for a shelter because we knew we were going to get one anyways. That's kind of what they do to our neighborhood. Hit after hit after hit, and we just keep getting back up. So we figured, okay, we'll volunteer for one, but we'd like to have some say in the population, maybe the location. And we were shot down, just shot out of the air. Nope, mind your business, basically, is the response that we received. It was a bit of a surprise that we weren't, we were surprised because we were probably only neighborhood that said, okay, look, we know this is going to happen. We'd just like to have some input in how we can survive this as a neighborhood.
Well, at the last meeting that you had with the mayor, when it was being explained to you and they were taking questions about it, you in particular seemed to come forward with another level of compromise where you spoke to the matter of all the issues and challenges, to use a positive word for it, that your neighborhood has.
I'm an optimist.
that you would appreciate if the city would help you out with an area, a problem unrelated to homelessness in exchange for welcoming the shelter. Could you talk a little bit about what those issues are for Ballpark?
Well, I'll say that none of these are new issues that haven't been brought before the city council to begin with. We've been debating, or I should say attempting to get them to address these issues for quite some time. But we have so many issues. Where do you start? We have abandoned buildings all over our neighborhood where people hang out and do drugs, and they move in, they squat. There was some kind of nest built in a parking lot about a year ago, and just people were going there to do drugs and prostitution. I frequently look on the side of my house and find condoms on the ground. And I live at the end of a dead end, and there's no reason for anyone to go out there. Our neighborhood has a lot of challenges. We have brothels in our neighborhood that you can go online, you can look them up, and this is where you find this prostitute or that prostitute and many of the massage parlors in our area. Our neighborhood is filled with no-tell motels where people hang out to do drugs and prostitution. If they're going to move, my argument there was simply, we know, and I would correct something you said earlier, we weren't welcoming them in shelter. I was acknowledging, and I'm probably the only one that does, that's probably what's going to happen, because that's what they give our neighborhood, right? Our neighborhood doesn't have a strong, beyond the council itself, nobody really advocates for our neighborhood. I went to the council meeting and I saw the Sugar House people, person after person after person. Nobody advocates for the ballpark neighborhood. We just expect that's the place that they want the stuff to go to. And so my request, my challenge for them was to start to ameliorate some of these challenges that we have, to address them, to improve the enforcement in our areas, code enforcement, law enforcement, close some of the brothels, so that you can kind of mitigate the impact of this new vulnerability that they're bringing into our neighborhood.
Well, this seems, I think, to the average citizen of Salt Lake, you're talking about brothels and things like that, is shocking. It doesn't seem like it would be any issue at all for the city to take care of something like that.
You wouldn't think so. We have so many police and we keep giving them more money. You would think that they could address these issues. I would agree with you wholeheartedly. Sorry.
Well, and the other thing that came up at that meeting at which I first met you was that, in spite of the fact that this might make the neighborhood sound like it's down at its heels, it's outside of downtown, it's the largest tax income contributing part of the city.
It's the second largest tax base in the state, is my understanding.
Oh, wow.
All the 300 West Retail Association is all the retailers on there. We have, I think, the largest Costco in the country. I mean, a lot of money flows out of our neighborhood. In fact, a lot of our money flows out of the area a couple of blocks from where they want to put the homeless shelter, along the same street almost. So that we raise that kind of as, why are you sabotaging your income base, right? All these programs that they want, this shelter itself is going to be built with funds that were raised in that neighborhood.
Well, then why is everybody so sort of accepting of what's going on, if not welcoming it, when you have financial clout, one would think?
One would think, wouldn't they? We have no clout. Nobody advocates for our neighborhood. If we were as effective as, Sugar House they haven't dealt with the challenges that we've had for some time, and I'm not attacking the Sugar House area. I would be rather frustrated if I lived there as well. But they haven't dealt with these issues that we have for as long as we have. And so they have this, whoa, don't bring that over here. We have it. We've endured it. We've worked with it. We raised our hand. We don't object to the homeless youth shelter that's in our area, to the women and children's shelter, the VOA. Actually, both of those belong to VOA. No objection to that whatsoever. We have mental health facilities in our area. We're not fighting those things. We recognize their need, and we've found a way to work with, by having some input, by being able to work with the city to make it work for us and for them, right? And I know this wasn't the question, but I'm going to put it out there. Because I've heard that the mayor is backpedaling a bit on the Sugar House location, we talk about the mayor. She's a single person, so it's easier to blame her. But it's the city council and it's the mayor. They're all working together on this. If they don't put it there, if they say, okay, you're right, we're going to impact this neighborhood too strenuously, it shows their hypocrisy. Because what they're arguing is that these are going to be contained, beautiful sites that are not going to damage the neighborhood, that are going to be beautiful, they're going to enhance the neighborhood, they're not going to dump their people out on the streets all day, they won't increase the risk to the neighborhood or the vulnerability to the neighborhood. So if they choose not to put it there, and they choose instead to maybe put 2 in the ballpark neighborhood, because that's kind of realistic, right? Just the way things go for our neighborhood. It shows the level of hypocrisy there. Clearly they don't believe the rhetoric that they're putting out. They're expressing that these are going to be safe places.
Supposedly it'll improve your property values to have a homeless shelter.
Yeah, I heard that too. I don't know if you heard laughing in the background of that meeting, but there you go. There's this guy. So yeah.
Now, your council member is Derek Kitchen, correct?
Aaron Mendenhall.
Oh, Aaron Mendenhall is in your district. I'm sorry. I didn't see the line right there. Well, you're saying that you don't have anybody speaking for your district. Erin Mendenhall has been a powerful voice on the council, but she seems to be more concerned about the Sugar House shelter that really isn't even in her district.
Everybody's more concerned about the Sugar House shelter because they're vocal and they're organized, and they came and they cried at the microphone. I mean, really, it is kind of the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You know, it wasn't a come up and ask us not to do this meeting. It was a come up and give us input, help us understand. And all they did was person after person, don't put this here, don't put this there. That should have no bearing whatsoever. I mean, that's a meeting we should have had before deciding the sites. If we can all, I mean, I'm pretty sure I can raise a couple hundred people from the ballpark neighborhood to go if that's an option, to just say, hey, we really don't want it. And I'm not sure that we don't necessarily want it, just we want to have some input into it.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things that came up that I heard, having gone to almost all the meetings on this, was that somehow there's an attitude that people who live in apartments don't count as much, aren't as important, or their families aren't as valuable as people who own their property, or at least have a mortgage on it, in a single-family household. And that seemed to bug some people at the ballpark meeting.
At the risk of sounding cynical, I would just point out as you speak that people who live in apartments tend not to donate to political campaigns, right? They tend not to, having lived in an apartment for most of my life and only now owning a home, they tend to live hand to mouth, right? Everybody wants to own their own home, to have a little bit of freedom to decide what their yard, to have a yard, right? Do they want to have pets? Do they want to stomp in the middle of the night on the floor? My kids are so loud, I could not live in an apartment ever again. They've been spoiled, unfortunately. So people who live in apartments tend to do so because they don't have time to attend council meetings. They have to work. They're the working class. They're the people who are trying to survive. They may not be aware of what's going on, and so they're not as vocal. So they don't get the attention. They don't count as, they're not counted as much. It is frustrating. When you live in an apartment, you move from place to place, so you don't get that investment in your location. So we have a lot of apartment buildings in our area. In fact, kind of one of the complaints that we've continuously pressed to the city council is they keep bringing in cost-adjusted living into our area, where the only people that are allowed to live there are the people who are impoverished. I have no objection but spread it out. It's consolidated into a single area, which we found in San Francisco and certain areas doesn't work. We're creating projects in our area. We've doubled the population of our area almost in the last couple of years with low income, so that's completely skewed off the rates, and with senior housing. But these people move from place to place. They don't have an investment in the area. Because again, who wants to live in a small apartment for the rest of your life? Hopefully we're having upward mobility in our society. People want to build homes. Having spent a year there or 2 years there, well, what do I care if there's a homeless shelter moving in next door? I'll just move. It'll cost me a couple $100s and I'll find an apartment on the other side of the town. I don't have that option because I own my land.
If there was one thing that the mayor's office and Erin Mendenhall could do for ballpark to incentivize or them taking a homeless resource center, what would that be? It doesn't have to be a homeless related issue, but would there be something that that would make this a positive thing for the neighborhood?
Well, there are quite a few things that could be done, but you did ask for one. I'm going to stay within the realm of reality. I would say, well, get the prostitutes out of our neighborhood, right? I would say, get the drugs out of our neighborhood. There's quite a lot of drugs in our neighborhood, and there's quite a lot of prostitution in our neighborhood. It's not Skid Row, there's not people just lining the streets, but you can see it as you go through. Recognizing that that's been a challenge that they simply haven't been able to accomplish, right? Choose a different site. Choose a more, I guess let me change that. There are other sites that they could go to, but also carefully consider the population, and don't just assume that because, again, we have a transient population, right? We move every couple of years. We have a lot of apartments all over our area. which they put in, I would point out, right, or they authorized. Choose the population based on the actual area. Look really closely at it. About, and I'm estimating off the top of my head here, but you've got High Street, and you look, there's the Public Works building on the others right behind where they're supposed to be. And next to the Public Works building is the only park that I can think of in the entire southwest sector of the city. So within about a couple hundred, 1,000 feet of the building is going to be our only park. It is our only park. Our long-term hope was that when they move out of the Public Works building, because they've been talking about growing, they'd build a huge Liberty Park style park there for the entire neighborhood. And that'll all be right next to the homeless shelter. So we have to consider what population you're going to put into there. Right?
Is this something you would have brought up had the neighborhood would have brought up had they had more input into
Definitely.
the process?
You also consider, and I brought this up during the meeting, the halfway house, which we talked about a little while ago, is a few blocks away from there. And the parole office, right? So every Tuesday when
The halfway house is for released felons.
Yeah.
On
So
parole.
Fortitude, you see it on the news. We've seen it on the news. That's had some challenges, right? It's doing a lot better now, but that is where people are released from prison. That's where men are released from prison, unless they're convicted. My understanding is, and I'm speaking only from my own perspective here. My understanding is that they don't mix sex offenders there, so they have to go somewhere else, or the severely mentally ill need to go somewhere else, because in prison those two populations, meaning sex offenders and anyone else, don't get along. Right? It's a problem. The people there have to walk. They don't own cars there. They're not allowed to own cars. They have to transition back into society. Our neighborhood hasn't complained about that either. I'm just pointing that out. They have to transition back into society. They have to walk from there to the heart of our neighborhood, right up 300 West, right by this proposed homeless resource center, where, let's be honest, if they're going to put the pedophiles anywhere, they're probably going to put them there, right? That's going to be a safety issue as well. And that's something that we attempted to raise, but so many people are speaking now that it's difficult to have a voice. And it's something to consider, the public safety issue. You're going to have them walking the same streets as, like the prison intentionally separates these populations because of the dangers that they pose to one another. And we're going to put them right next to each other, a few blocks away from each other, forced to walk the same streets, ride the same buses, while still in at least for the halfway house, while still in a custodial capacity, still in a prison mentality of, oh, I've got to go attack sex offenders because they're, right? And I realize that not everybody living at the resource center will be a sex offender, even if they choose to do the male population. It'd probably be a very small percentage, but that's what brought all this up to begin with, was that the complaint was made that you have sex offenders living with children at the Rio Grande. And that's obviously not a healthy scenario, but what are you gonna do because they're both homeless? So there's gonna be an assumption in the small-minded individuals that every male that comes out of that place is a potential sex offender, and thus open season upon them. There are a lot of considerations like that don't seem to have been taken into account, but would have had the community had some input, some say, some sitting at the table to say, hey, have you considered this? Have you considered that? And those are the things that we would have brought up. Have you considered that it's right next to our only park?
Well, Kevin, thanks for talking to me today about the ballpark neighborhood that's looking for a little light at the end of the tunnel and just got stuck with a all-male
We haven't gotten
homeless
stuck with it
resource
yet.
center.
Hopefully not, but it's a possibility.
It's a possibility. This is Glenn Morchel, Managing Editor, Salt Lake Magazine, and you can find more Salt Lake Speaks podcasts at saltlakemagazine.com podcasts.